What you're looking at is the result of what's being called the largest animal rescue operation in this country's history. 60 burros have been shipped into Chaska from the state of California. The animals were being killed off by the U.S. Navy because they had begun spilling over onto naval training grounds there. Well, the burros are not native to the state of California. Years ago, they were released by miners and prospectors who had come to the Golden State searching for gold. And Barb Brown will have more on this story as part of this, the Wednesday, the June 9th edition of the 5 p.m. report. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doug Moore. And from our St. Paul newsroom, Caroline Lowe will have the details on that city's police training program. Mark Rosen will have the story of the latest addition to the Minnesota North Stars. The team drafted Brian Bellows, who many call the best in the game since Wayne Gretzky. And we're going to show you how at least one part of old science fiction movies is finally turned into reality at Fort Benning, Georgia. This among the stories up, but first let's check in and see what else we got today.
Well, good afternoon, Doug. Also on today's 5, Governor Quie and former Governor Rudy Perpich met today to discuss the problems on the Iron Range. We will have details on that story. Also, Twin City Bakers still trying to hammer out an agreement before their 6 o'clock strike deadline. We'll have the story. And Dave Nimmer will report on the growing controversy over funding for area neighborhood groups. All of these stories coming up. But at the top this afternoon, as we reported last night, the State Health Department has now confirmed that outbreak of hepatitis A at O'Gara's West Restaurant that is located in the Signal Hills Shopping Center in West St. Paul. Now, the disease has been traced to a cook there. The Health Department is now trying to get in touch with people who may have contracted the disease, but at this point may not know about it. Our health and science reporter, psychologist, Dr. Larry KUTNER, has been following the story. He is joined today by Dr. Michael Osterholm of the State Health Department. Thank you, Doctor, for showing up this afternoon. How serious is this outbreak?
Well, the numbers have grown quite a bit during the day. We began yesterday with 7 confirmed cases. We now have 12 confirmed cases of the disease and an additional 24 more that most probably within the next 2 days we will confirm as cases of hepatitis A. And then we have an additional 10 to 15 beyond that, which are possible cases, which are now seeking medical attention and will be known within 24 to 48 hours if they too are cases.
Dr. Osterholm, you're an epidemiologist, so you trace how diseases are transmitted and how the patterns work out. How did you trace this back to O'Gara's West Restaurant?
Well, we do routine surveillance for hepatitis in the state, meaning that whenever a case of hepatitis occurs and is reported by a doctor to us, we interview the patient and ask them a series of questions. In the case of where it's possible hepatitis type A or the infectious hepatitis that's transmitted by food, we call them up and ask them where they ate in the 2 to 6 weeks before that time. The name of that restaurant came up on these occasions, and these were totally separate incidents. We put that all together, contacted the restaurant. In this case, we did also know that a food handler had been ill that had worked at that restaurant, so it fit into place pretty quickly.
Okay, and people who ate at O'Gara's West between April 8th and April 25th and who've been feeling ill should contact you. What happens when they contact you?
Well, let me just make one correction on that. We've now expanded the period now to April 30th. We do have evidence that the cook didn't leave as soon as we thought he did, and that there was some transmission on April 29th and the 28th. When they contact us, the thing that we do is we interview them to find out when they were there, what they ate, and try to make sure that all their contacts receive gamma globulin so that they too don't come down with hepatitis.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Doug, back to you.
Well, the city of Chaska has a few unexpected new residents, 60 burros from California. They've been shipped in as part of one of the largest animal rescue operations ever undertaken in this country. And Barb Brown is standing by live now for a report. Barb?
Doug, the burros were rescued from a naval weapons station in California. These are 60 of the 4,000 that are being rounded up there, where they would have been killed otherwise. Now they are being placed in homes around the country, and 250, at least 250, are to be placed in Minnesota. And it's all thanks to the Fund for Animals. With me is Nancy Nelson, who is president of the Minnesota Fund for Animals. Nancy, why were they killing these animals, and how did you manage to stop that?
Well, the Navy had indicated that they were in the way since they were on the Naval Reserve. Of course, humane organizations disputed that, and the Navy did go in and kill 638 of them, at which point the Fund for Animals was able to get a court injunction to force them to stop. The court then decreed we had the right to rescue these 4,000 over the next 18 months and place them in homes.
What kind of pets do they make, and what kinds of homes are you looking for?
Well, Barb, I understand they make wonderful pets. I say I understand because obviously I've never lived with a burro, but everyone who has tells us that they become very calm very quickly, though they are wild, having come to us, and that they become very dog-like. They follow people around. They demand a lot of physical attention. People must be willing to take two at a time. We want them to have one of their own kind to live with. They have to have a fenced-in area. An indoor barn is absolutely essential because they are coming off the desert, and we want them to have protection from the Minnesota winters.
And it does cost a little money.
Yes, the males are $100 and the females are $125. That's because the ratio is so different. The males are coming out 4 to 1, so we have more males than females. And you know, I swear that one of them back here can talk, and all I could hear it say was, "I want to go live with Pat Miles."
Great. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Barb.
People who are interested can get in touch with the Fund for Animals. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Barb. Well, negotiations are continuing between Twin Cities bakers and representatives from several local grocery stores. A federal mediator brought the two sides together this morning. This in an effort to hammer out an agreement before tonight's 6 o'clock strike deadline. The bakers are trying to reach agreement on a new contract with Lund's, Byerly's, Jerry's, and SuperValu. And a restraining order has been issued in the Teamsters, Warehousemen's, and Truckers' strike against SuperValu. That order, which lasts for 1 week, restricts the number of picketers at the Hopkins warehouse to 4. Police say some windows at the warehouse from the Lebanese capital of Beirut. And while the fighting intensifies, so too do the charges and the denials. Israel claims to have shot down 20 Syrian fighter jets, while Syria says it has dropped 19 Israeli planes from the sky. Both sides dispute each other's claims. And while more Lebanese villages come under Israeli occupation, the United States is preparing an aid program for the Lebanese refugees, but that aid may be too little too late. Bombing raids grow more frequent by the day. Casualty lists also grow, while medical supplies for the wounded are rapidly being depleted. And the number of wounded and killed continues to grow in the world's other war this afternoon. Britain has reportedly suffered heavy losses in the battle around the Falkland Island town of Fitzroy, one of 2 settlements recaptured by the British in the past 24 hours. And late this afternoon, Argentina reportedly shelled the British ship Sir Galahad and caused heavy damage. Britain says it shot down 7 enemy jets in today's fighting. Well, President Reagan is in Bonn, West Germany this afternoon, the last stop of his 10-day European tour. The President and the First Lady flew into Bonn from London for a day of talks with German leaders. The presidential reception was one of the few in Europe not marked by demonstrations. It was marked by a warm greeting from German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt before the two reviewed a unit of the German military. And after a round of talks with Schmidt, the President spoke to West Germany's parliament on the issue of American arms in that country.
In recent weeks, we in the Alliance have consulted on how best to invigorate the Vienna negotiations on mutual and balanced force reductions. Based on these consultations, Western representatives in the Vienna talks soon will make a proposal by which the two alliances would reduce their respective ground force personnel in verifiable stages to a total of 700,000 men and their combined ground and air force personnel to a level of 900,000 men.
In other news, crime in the Twin Cities rose overall by 31% during the 1970s. And according to a recent study by the Metro Council, violent crimes against persons such as murder, robbery, rape, and aggravated assault increased by 42% over the previous decade. Perhaps the most startling statistic is that rape in the metro area soared by a staggering 138% from the year 1970 to 1980. Officials aren't sure if the actual number of rapes increased by that percentage or if the reporting of such crimes was just more accurate. Well, a probe into the death of a Roseville police officer and a look at what may be the best prevention against fatalities on the St. Paul police force are 2 stories being followed in our St. Paul newsroom this afternoon. Let's go to Caroline Lowe for the details.
Well, Doug, a Ramsey County grand jury today indicted George Allen Graham for the fatal shooting of a Roseville police officer last month. Graham was indicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of second-degree murder for allegedly shooting Officer Bruce Russell on May 16th. The suspect is currently being held on $500,000 bail at the Ramsey County Adult Detention Center. He is scheduled to appear in district court on June 11th, at which time a trial date will be set for him. Officer Russell was one of 3 Minnesota law enforcement officers to be fatally shot in the past year. Nationally, the number of officers who have lost their lives at an assailant's gun has dramatically increased in the past decade. That situation has prompted many police departments to review their shooting and survival training for their officers, including St. Paul's, which has been fortunate enough to have no shooting fatalities in some 12 years. In most situations, police say a suspect with a gun generally has an advantage over the officer involved. So their training these days focuses on how to reduce the officer's vulnerability and chances of being shot. We spent the afternoon at the St. Paul firing range in Woodbury, and we'll have a full report on their training procedures tonight at 6. Doug?
Okay, thank you, Caroline. Governor Quie and former Minnesota Governor Rudy Perpich met for the first time today since the 1978 elections. The state capitol session was billed as non-political, but that's tough to do in an election year. Pat has the details.
Well, you know, you can't get these two men together and not talk politics, of course, Doug, but the real purpose for the meeting was for a closed-door session with the governor, Governor Quie, that is, to discuss Perpich's $17 million plan for developing alternative energy sources in Minnesota. Alan Cox was at the meeting. He's here now to give us details on what happened.
It wasn't indeed an unusual scene, Pat. The first time since a gubernatorial candidates debate in October 1978 that Rudy Perpich and Al Quie had met. Their relationship during the campaign was such that the two didn't even meet during the transition period between the Perpich administration and the Quie administration. But they were smiling for the cameras today, and they emerged from their half-hour closed session to say there's little difference at this point in their opinions on relief for the Iron Range. They both say it's needed, and they both say there should be short-term and long-term programs. Governor Quie, though, says he wants complete agreement among the various factions on the issue before he'll call a special session of the legislature. Quie wants it to last only one day. Just about everybody in state government has had their fill of special sessions this year. At this point, Perpich is proposing about $12 million in programs. The number seems to vary a bit. Last week he was talking about $17 million. Perpich told me at his campaign headquarters after his session with Quie that he's having to do a little give and take. Originally, he proposed spending $5 to $10 million on immediate jobs for people whose unemployment benefits are just about to expire this summer. But he told me now that he's may have to give up a little bit on that to put more money into long-term projects like plants to make fuel from peat and biogas, projects for farmers to be able to use waste from livestock to provide energy. He also wants to build 2 fish hatcheries in northeastern Minnesota. That, of course, not for energy, but to give a boost to the tourism business there.
Well, this is certainly a good campaign issue, is it not, for Perpich right now?
It is. He says he's trying to keep politics out of the matter, but obviously it is the main theme he's seized on at this point in the campaign.
All right. Thank you, Alan. When the Wednesday 5 continues in just a moment, we will hear Dr. Walt Lyons tell us we're all wet and can expect to stay that way, at least for a while. And we'll also travel to New York City for the reception of the Viking ship, the Yemkomst.
Hi, I'm Steve Doyle.
And I'm Marlo Bendow. On the next PM Magazine, we'll go behind the scenes of the Laughingstock of St. Paul. We'll see their latest off-the-wall musical, Hopeless Romantic.
And what happens when the world's greatest hairstylists get together? The blow dryers and the curling irons are hot, and the competition makes for exciting new creations on the next PM Magazine.
PM Magazine, it's good TV. PM Magazine, it's good TV.
I think football players are highly overpaid.
What is it you want? Stan?
Basically, we want a percentage of the gross revenues that come in. The team that went 2-14 last year made the same amount of money as the team that won the Super Bowl. So there's no incentive for them to get better.
What you're really asking for, then, is profit sharing.
Exactly.
Right?
Will the NFL players strike? We hope you'll join us.
Let's get another traffic check right now. Dale?
All right, Doug. We're looking at about the same kind of problems we had before, where you moved over west here. We're looking at 94 and 35W in Minneapolis area. But you can see traffic still generally slow. A lot of just slow traffic all over the metropolitan area in most areas today. So we'll keep an eye on things. Hopefully get things moving a little bit better. I'll be back to you in a few minutes with an update.
Well, Minnesota's Viking ship got a real Big Apple welcome today. The ship arrived in New York City, where it will dock for several days. This is its last stop before striking out across the Atlantic on the final leg of its journey to Norway. The ship, called the Yemkomst, began its journey from Duluth last month. Well, we were talking about wet weather yesterday, and we sort of were on the tail end of that. I don't think we got all that much here in the Twin Cities, did we?
No, the official bucket, Doug, only had 0.02 of an inch of rain. Now, there was a lot of water all over the five-state area. We just sort of slithered between the showers very adroitly, and except for a few lingering spritzels out there, most of it is over. The current conditions show a rather dramatic change in the weather. check out 61 degrees, but the winds are west at 31 miles an hour. The barometer is rising sharply, all courtesy of a cold front. So it's going to be kind of an autumn-like night tonight. I don't know what happened to summer, but anyhow. Well, if you look at the 5-state temperatures, it's still in the 70s in southeastern Iowa, but 47 degrees the last hour up at Thief River Falls. That's not low. That's like almost the high they've had today. So pretty chilly air is swirling out of Canada. Big old low is just trucking on up into Canada, and the northwest winds in back of it, which are gusting up to 40 miles an hour, are going to make it feel very chilly. Area lakes, Jim Gilbert reports, have temperatures all the way up to 67 degrees, but it's just going to be too cold to even think about swimming. In fact, you should wait until the temperatures of the water reach 70. Satellite photograph from earlier today showed some attempt at clearing that came through the metro area, but the clouds in back of it, as you can see off to the west, are just coming right over us. We'll have mostly cloudy conditions tonight, but the breaking conditions up in northern portions of North Dakota will arrive. We did an anti-rain dance down here in the Weather Center, and finally the showers, which have been moving northeastwards rapidly through the area all day, have just about exited. They're heading up towards Duluth rather rapidly. A few of them were rather heavy. Nothing reached severe limits, though, and spotty precipitation amounts up to a quarter an inch were reported. The reason for all of that, well, we have the cold air out west, like 26 degrees for a low this morning at Rollins, Wyoming. That's nippy, and it is just moving east on those stiff breezes, so tonight it's going to feel more like October. And you can see the cool air is pushing a big area of rain eastwards. In fact, that rain is quite heavy. Severe weather watches are out for portions of Ohio. It's rather ironic. This is the anniversary of one of the worst tornado outbreaks ever, because on June 8th and 9th, tornadoes moved through Flint and Cleveland, then on into New England, around Worcester, Massachusetts, producing some pretty severe conditions with up to tens of millions of dollars of damage. But for tonight, nothing that dramatic here, just cloudy, breezy, and cooler. The winds northwest 15 to 25 miles an hour, the lows under 50 degrees in many areas. Tomorrow, partly sunny and breezy. Hold on to the babushkas. Northwest winds up to 20 miles an hour and gusty, and the high about 66 degrees. That's 10 short of normal, Pat. So there we are. And Pat, I happen to have this phone call here for you. It's from a burrow out in, I don't quite understand it. Shall I transfer it?
Give it to Doug. Give it to Doug.
Okay, I'll give it to
What you're saying is that those people who hope to get their lawns watered for free are going to have to pull out the hoses.
Oh, it's Doug up there.
Okay.
Doug, you got this call.
We're going to get this rolling here anytime. Okay. Well, owls are reportedly going berserk in the small town of Clark Summit, Pennsylvania, and no one knows who's going to be attacked next. The police say the owls have swooped down and attacked several people. One woman required 8 stitches. Officials say the owls are trying to protect their young, but some of the town's residents say they're beginning to feel like they're living through Alfred Hitchcock's old movie called The Birds. And scenes from the old Buck Rogers movies are coming true at Fort Benning, Georgia. Remember the old power packs the heroes used to strap on their backs so they could fly off into the sunset and escape all manner of bad guys? Well, they've just invented one of those type contraptions at the Georgia Infantry Station, and it's powered by a turbine engine and is designed so it can whip around tall buildings and trees at a speed of 60 miles an hour. Right now, we're looking at 22 minutes after the hour of 5, and still ahead, a report from Mark Rosen on the North Star's latest acquisition in the NHL Players Draft.
Can the new Kinney keep up with hot model Christy Brinkley?
Kinney can. Kinney can. Kinney can.
Because Kinney's got the high ones, the low ones, the bright ones. All at a fraction of what Christy usually spends.
Oh, look. Isn't that Christy? Kinney can.
And we are.
We'd like to salute Honeywell Incorporated, fulfilling 3 community concerns in this area: youth education, youth employment, and environmental protection. Honeywell sponsors MERC, the Minneapolis Education and Recycling Center in South Minneapolis, offering to the public a 24-hour drop-off service for cans, glass, and paper. The MERC program includes an alternative school to encourage those who have left school early to finish high school. 2 teachers provide classroom instruction approved by the Minneapolis Public Schools to 30 youths for 20 hours each week. Also, young people are trained to recycle, and an employment counselor assists with other job skills. If you're interested in participating in the Merck program or in bringing your bottles, cans, and paper to the Merck Center for Recycling, the folks at Honeywell want you to call 823-4460.
Corridors of the Minneapolis City Hall have been abuzz lately over the issue of citizen participation in city government. In light of drastic funding cuts for many programs, some city leaders are now getting fed up with citizen groups telling elected officials what to do. Dave Nimmer has been working on the story. He's joined us now to give us details. Dave?
Well, Pat, last year in 1981, about almost $300,000 was divvied up among 15 neighborhood-type planning agencies called NSAs to spend. And this year, that appropriation, partly because of a cutback in federal funds, has been reduced to $62,000. And as you might expect, that's caused some grumbling in the neighborhoods about the commitment of City Hall to citizen participation. Some groups, Pat, say the council almost appears to be getting back at citizen participation groups for all of the lobbying they may have done about their parochial concerns before the council. They say they get the feeling from some aldermen that they say, we'd rather do it ourselves and we don't need your input anymore. Council members, for the most part, deny that, but some, like Alice Rainville, the city council president, admits that some groups who have their own planning staffs, these are pretty well-organized neighborhood groups, have been almost high-handed and arrogant in their approach toward aldermen and city hall, and that rankles her a bit at the same time that the city is cutting back on its staff. Alice recalls that she saw an ad in one of the neighborhood organizations that one neighborhood group was advertising for a planner. At the same time, the city council was thinking about cutting 17 planners from the city staff and did so.
Interesting. Certainly those two groups need to work together as well.
And that kind of hassle is only going to be settled this summer, and I don't know how it's going to turn out.
All right, Dave. In other news today, the Minnesota North Stars pulled a few strings and struck a few deals to come up with the most touted amateur hockey what is that? Player in North America. Mark Rosen now at the Sports Center with details. What is that?
NHL.
NHL. I get them all mixed up.
Get this straight. Well, they've actually been working on this deal for over a month, and what Louis wants, Louis usually gets. We're speaking, of course, of the perpetual motion general manager of the Minnesota North Stars, Lou Nanne, and he got his man, Brian Bellows, the 17-year-old right winger from Kitchener, Ontario, who, in the words of Nanne, could lead us to a Stanley Cup title next year. He's that good. Bellows, a 6-foot, 194-pound winger, scored 45 goals and had 52 assists in just 47 games last year. Now, in order to get Bellows, the North Stars traded Brad Palmer to the Boston Bruins, along with Dave Donnelly, who was a second-round draft choice a year ago. Palmer scored 22 goals and had 23 assists last year. Meanwhile, Phil Housley of South St. Paul High School was the first Minnesotan selected and the only U.S.-born player taken on the first round. The Buffalo Sabres drafted Housley as the 6th selection on the first round, the highest a Minnesotan has ever gone. Buffalo general manager Scotty Bowman said of the 18-year-old defenseman, he's the closest thing I've seen to Bobby Orr. Bowman was most impressed with Housley's performance in the recent World Championships. The question now is whether Housley will turn pro immediately or play with the University of Minnesota for a year. Phil says his mind has not been made up yet, but indications are that Phil will turn pro. Housley is one of a number of Minnesota players taken in today's draft, and here's a list of them. Mike Anderson of Buffalo, going to Buffalo from North St. Paul. Dave Malley of Edina, Scott Sandlin of Hibbing, drafted by Montreal. The North Stars, picking third in the third round, selected Wally Chapman of Edina, Corey Millen going to the Rangers, John DeVoe going to Montreal, Scott Bridges to New Jersey, and Tim Mischler going to Winnipeg. And Tom Hanneman, by the way, is en route from Montreal and will have a special report on today's draft tonight on the 10 p.m. report. Doug?
Okay, thank you, Mark. And we'll return with some final notes in just a moment.
Problems in your vegetable garden? Now you can wipe out worms, annihilate aphids, banish beetles and thrips, and defend against disease with Ortho Tomato Vegetable Dust. Convenient, ready-to-use Ortho Tomato Vegetable Dust is tough on insects and disease, but won't harm plants. And our specially designed package lets you spray up, down, all around without clumping or clogging. A healthy harvest of delicious vegetables. At Ortho, our concern for gardens is always growing.
When you make your play and you save the day, when you're turning 17, when you did your best and you passed the test, when you're starting out a dream, after any time that's special, after big times, after small, it's always been Bridgman's after all.
Bridgman's. Is there any more delicious way to top off a special time? Since 1883, Bridgman's has made millions of happy endings in dozens of flavors. We'd love to make one just for you.
Bridgman's after all.
When my husband has a hemorrhoid flare-up, you'd think he was a bear. More doctors recommend Anusol suppositories for hemorrhoids. Anusol is not the one you hear about a lot, but it is the medication more doctors recommend. Anusol soothes, lubricates, in many cases temporarily relieves the occasional symptoms of inflammation like pain, itch. Anusol can also turn a bear into a honey.
Ah, Anusol from Park Davis, the suppositories more doctors recommend.
And for a preview of some of the stories coming up at 6, let's check in with Dave in the newsroom.
Doug, details on a traffic incident last night in which a Minneapolis police officer suffered a broken leg, and on a court hearing today involving charges that a recent Minneapolis police sting operation was racist. We'll go to the groundbreaking for the Twin Cities News construction project, the Grand Hotel in St. Paul. Doug?
And war in the Mideast and in the South Atlantic continues today. This will be among the stories coming up next on the CBS Evening News. Dave and Pat up next for the 6 p.m. report. I'll see you later tonight at 10 for the 10 p.m. report. Have a nice evening.
This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. One of the biggest air battles of modern times was fought today over Lebanon. It came as Syria stepped up its support for the Palestine Liberation Organization. Syria, meanwhile, claimed that